Welcome to the Cove Podcast, your stop for PME on the go.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Cove Podcast. I'm Captain Todd Lemke, your regular host. What we're going to go through in this episode is reconnaissance, predominantly infantry reconnaissance, that being dismounted and mounted reconnaissance. And we're also going to talk about the Dog Cup. I have a patrol commander here from 1RAR, Corporal Andrew Noseda. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So I suppose you've done a number of things in your career. You've been at 1RAR for some time in the Recon trade. How long have you done in Recon?
4 years now, two as a digger and then two as a PC.
Yeah, perfect. And acting up now in a sergeant's role as well. So you've done a plethora of different jobs. Before we get through that, you've done Dog Cup a number of times, the Duke of Gloucester Cup. I suppose we should start there and talk about what that's about in the infantry trade and what sort of happens. So can you just explain, having competed a number of different times, what the Dog Cup is?
So Duke of Gloucester Cup, it's basically infantry competition between all the battalions. Each battalion sends a section to traditionally it's to Singleton to compete. Last year it was to Tully to compete in the jungle, just working on mill skills, shooting, pretty much everything you're assessed on as an infantry soldier.
So is it only infantry that compete, and who gives teams to the competition?
So yeah, just infantry and every regular army infantry battalion. So 1, 2, 3, 5, 7 and 8, 9, 6 and 8, 9.
Yeah, and how do you get selected to go on Dog Cup and compete? Like how obviously you probably, I imagine, as the Seco get to pick the team ish, but like how do you get picked to go and represent the battalion?
So from my understanding, every battalion runs it differently. 1RAR normally just runs tryouts. So we'll do a diagnostic testing of fitness, GMK skills, shooting, everything like that to pick a run-on team of whoever volunteers. I know in the past, 1RAR normally have their battalion section comp, which is the OB trophy, and normally they'll pick the section commander from that as well as the majority of the team, or then that section commander will be able to pick his team from who he wants.
Yeah, perfect. So that I suppose the competition side of the house is like it's battalion v battalion, isn't it? Like you're trying to go at it with each other.
Basically. Yeah, there's definitely that rivalry of wanting to beat, like in Townsville, wanting to beat the other infantry battalions, and then wider army as well, having that rep over the battalions in Brisbane, Adelaide and Darwin. That's
awesome. So before we get to like what the Dog Cup is and what you're assessed on and how it's designed, you talked about a change in training areas and more so a change in vegetation. Can we come back? What's the goal at the end? So obviously you get first. If you win the Dog Cup, you get first. But is there does that subsequently lead on to anything else, or what's the go?
Yeah, so the winning team will do Cambridge Patrol. So they'll go over to the UK and basically do an international mill skills against other armies, being assessed on same thing, infantry tactics in an international level.
Yeah, that's awesome. So go over to the UK and compete, fly over there. Yeah. So coming back to the Dog Cup, how did you pick your team? I know you would ideally like the maximum amount of time to prepare before you go in and compete, but how did the preparations go? But selecting your team first, and then we can go on subsequently onto what you trained with and on.
So 1RAR last year and this year, we've run the diagnostic testing. Previous years, it's basically either they just pull dudes from support or volunteers without that sort of formal process. But the last couple of years, we've run the diagnostic testing, BFA standards, pack marching for like 60 minutes under time, a GMK, you go to the wets, do gun shoot, RP3, try and get some pistol shoots in there, and then some other strength testing and stuff like that, just to get a big diagnostic across the board of where everyone's sitting, and basically just have a rank system based on that of however many volunteers. We had, I think, 16 last year try out and have that 1 to 16, and then that gives you a baseline of where dudes are at, who you want to pick on the team, and then from that we'll also take into other factors like what qualifications guys have that'll help on competition, like SCCC, CFA, Recon, DFSW, and then experience, who's worked together before, who's got that cohesion as a section, as well as who's reliable, who are guys who consistently work hard throughout the year for the battalion.
And are you trying to overlay skills? Like if you have 5 people who are all over comms, but no one who's good at like the medical stuff, obviously you can catch it up a little bit, but I imagine you don't have a lot of time. So is there that component of it too? You're trying to spread out. You only have a finite number of people and you're trying to spread skills.
Yeah, you're absolutely trying to spread that skill. Like you're trying to get at least a couple of CFAs, guys who are all over that medical side, a couple of guys who are comms, 1, 2 guys that have done recon can do that, lead scout, PTR, or that recon task, and then a couple of guys for DFSW if there's AFE recognition, any sort of tank stalk, stuff like that.
Yeah. So that's basically, I suppose, in the preparation phase, you're trying to predict what's going to happen inside the competition. Having done it a few times yourself, how many times have you done it? And basically, has it changed a lot in the times that you've done it? And what's the general vibe of the competition?
So I've done it 3 times at all 3 ranks. So 2019, I did it as a digger. 2022, I was the 2IC. And then last year, 2024, I did it as the section commander. There's definitely knowns within the competition. So there's going to be some sort of live fire, section attacks, patrolling, everything that's the core infantry stuff, they're always going to target. And then you're trying to game what you think other stands could be or are going to be, noting like you can only train so much. You're not going to be able to have 6 months to train for absolutely everything. And you're not going to know what is going to be in the comp. You know the 40-50% solution, and then there's the other stands you're trying to practice for and get ready, especially last year, noting it was in the jungle, having that jungle mindset towards all the training.
Mm. Yeah, so you knew that it was changing training areas to Tully like well in advance, or was it like in the later stages of your preparation?
It was a bit of a rumour at the start. And having done it previously, I didn't believe the rumour. I was like, no way, they're having it in Tully.
Yeah.
And then once they released the warning order and they confirmed, no, it's in Tully, it was like a 3-day phase in TFTA and then a 4-day phase, I believe, in Tully.
Yeah.
So like working on 2 different skills in that area. But yeah, like we knew enough in advance to our training program, which went for 6-7 weeks. We could target stuff that we were going to learn in the jungle.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you just led me into an excellent segue. Training program, right? So you've selected the team based on a mix of skills, and they've gone through a tryout, and everyone's competed. 16 people went up for it and get selected. How do you go about, as the SECO, now designing the training program? Do you have a team manager or anything like that, or is it just you? Are you in the hot seat?
A bit of both. So I've been with teams where it's just been on the SECO, and then guys, other section commanders will come in, help out with training. The last couple of years, they've sort of put it on ops and RPs to fill in those spots to help dudes out or create that training program, make the bookings. The training program it's done in advance, so we don't know. The warning order hadn't come out yet. We've sort of put a template down for the training program as if it was a Singo Dog Cup, and that was like, so we're targeting urban, we're targeting combat shooting, still green roll stuff, everything like that you'd hit in Singo. And then once we found out it's Tully, you're then having to make, adjustments on the fly to be like, there's probably not going to be an urban thing in Tully. There's a couple of camps, there'll be camp clearances, but not a full deliberate urban clearance. I think when the JI got sent out, there was no blade tech, so we made the assumption there wasn't going to be combat shooting, or if there was, it would just be stire. So we tried to like cut away that pistol shooting.
Drawing out the implied task sort of thing. Yeah.
To know.
The hints and tips.
And then, just gaming it to like, it's in Townsville. We know the ranges. There's not a full 600 metre range with all 10 to 20 lanes that you're going to be able to shoot RP6, which we've shot previous years. So we sort of know it's either going to just be RP3 or maybe like an old LF18 shoot that only goes out to 400, which would end up being RP3 and LF18. And then, other shoots would be like field firing, stuff like that. Yeah,
you're trying to draw that stuff out of the warning order and in your experience in the last competitions. Is it stressful being the SECO for the battalion, basically?
Yes and no. Like, I know previous years, it is all on the SECO. People remember who the SECO is. They're not like, they see the result of one IR, but you're always questioning who is the SECO for it, because a lot of it is on the SECO. If you're assessed 50% of each stand is on the orders, then that's all on the SECO. And then the conduct, another, 20-30% of that's your C2 on the ground. That there's a large component that's on the SECO to perform. But saying that, like, each digger still makes up their role and still can influence every single stand, like, which we can go into because of how close the competition was last year.
Yeah.
Like any digger could have influenced the results of a team like us coming second to first to third, or a team that comes fourth, fifth to then pushing towards the top 3.
So I suppose, how did you go to address the elephant in the room, and then subsequently, like, what went right and wrong throughout your competition? So
pretty well, like, we tied first initially, and then on a count back, 3RR beat us from first place standings. So they did a count back every stand. They had the most first place standings, I believe by 1 or 2. And then we ended up winning the warfighting trophy, which was assessed as like the Tully component.
Yep.
So performed the best there. Performed pretty well across the board. I think there was only probably 1 or 2 stands where I was like not confident that we'd performed really well in, which one was the Recon stand.
Yeah.
And
so
then,
you were Recon qualified.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, sorry, keep going.
And then one of the TFTA stands, the medical side was a bit just complex, so I wasn't sure how we'd done. But I don't think we did poorly in that one either.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. In the Recon stand, just talk through it because obviously it's your bread and butter. Like talk about how that actually went, the stand.
So we got there, got the con ops, and same as every other stand for the competition. Once we got to Tully, you're pretty much getting a 4 to 6 hour window to run the stand, and that's getting your frago, fully developing a set of orders, delivering that full set of orders, and then doing the full conduct. And so for the Recon stand, it was getting your frago, pretty much writing a super compressed con ops to then back brief, have any RFIs, what do you need to know to adjust your planning, and then going into your orders, delivering a quick set of orders how you're going to run, and then stepping off on task. And obviously, if that's a 4 hour window, you're dedicating 25%. So an hour to a con ops and an orders is super compressed. And then you're wanting to do that as quick as possible so you've got more time on target, because normally Recon, you'd want at least 6 to 8 to get that initial PTR. And in the jungle as well, it's even harder because everything's so close, everything's so noisy that you've got to get closer. You've got to have that risk, as well as you want more standoff to where maybe you're not seeing everything, but you're getting pictures of information or pockets to where you can start answering stuff without getting too close that you're going to compromise yourself. So we did that orders. Got me and the lead scout stepped off. ID'd the campground that we were doing the PTR on and found a pretty good spot, but just probably got a bit too close, a bit too complacent. Stayed there a bit too long on the ground, and then they sent a clearing patrol from believe the north to the south, which we'd gotten sat imagery beforehand, which aided in planning. But then being the jungle, the canopy didn't show the track they used on the sat imagery. There was one track on there, but it was a vehicle track, and the foot tracks weren't visible on the sat imagery. So we hadn't seen them actually going around that track. So we stayed low, tried to stay unseen. We saw them coming from the south, and we were like, if we move now, they'll definitely see us. So basically we're like, if they start patrolling along this way, they're going to get us. If they keep patrolling straight into the campground, we'll be safe and we can move back.
And you're just praying that they do the ladder.
Yeah, pretty much. Just praying they keep walking straight and don't hook right. But obviously they'd been told to patrol around the perimeter, so they did the right thing. They weren't lazy and just walked straight back in, and they started patrolling right. And me and the lead scout just, again, stayed doggo pretty much just under this big fallen tree, hoping maybe they walk past us, maybe they're not looking that well. And probably poor sighting of a position to look from. It had a bit of a inlet where they naturally walked down towards our position straight onto us. They got about a few meters from us. At that point, we're both just like pretty much lying on our backs at instant, waiting for them to see us. So we're getting the first rounds off before they are. If they see us, there's that sort of shocked look on their face. We're shooting them and then just legging it out of there. And that's pretty much what happened. Okay. At least they got within a couple of meters. They looked around. I think one dude looked down, saw us, and we just got first rounds off. And
who got the first
back.
rounds off, you or the scout?
Oh, it would have been within a fraction of a second. I think it might have been the scout. But then we just started legging it, and then legging it through the jungle as well. It felt a bit like Frodo in Return of the King, where you're just stuck in some big cobweb because you're just getting hung up on branches and everything.
Just trying to brute force your way through.
I was trying to brute force my way through all this wait a while and branches getting stuck up in the air, and had to get secateurs out. And I'm thinking if they're running up behind us chasing us, then they're probably catching us nearly. But got out. Still got a fair bit of information, so counted towards the stand, but obviously had been told for the competition side, if you got compromised, it was 50% loss of points, which I believe happened to the 4 of the 7 teams. So it was pretty common. And there is probably a large recon force amongst the battalions that they've all got 1 or 2 recon dudes that still would have got compromised.
Yeah. Hard task.
Yeah.
So I suppose that was one of the hardest stands. And you talked about 4 teams sort of messing up, I suppose, on the ground. Can you talk about what were the harder or easier stands throughout the most recent competition?
Pretty much every stand's very hard, and in different ways. So last year, probably the patrol counter ambush stand was the physically hardest. It was just 4 hours of patrolling through mud, super slow, traditional infantry patrolling at, that 500 meters per hour. and we patrolled like that for about 4 hours before we finally hit the ambush site and conducted a counter ambush drill. So that was, very physically demanding on the body, which I didn't mind. Some of the boys hated it.
Yeah.
Noting it was just walking with a pack, super, super slow, stopping every 15, doing little listening posts or listening patrols, and then hitting that counter ambush site right at the end when you're tired and having to do a counter ambush drill.
Yeah.
In terms of on me, probably the hardest was the ambush because, again, 4 hours to write a full set of ambush orders, deliver those orders, and then go through a full conduct.
Are you doing ConOps first, the concept of operations?
So the ConOps, I believe, was only for the Recon stand.
Okay,
Whether
cool.
it was assessed on every stand, that's not something you know because they sort of keep you in the dark on what's assessed, what's not.
And
so
are the DS like cold, like zero sort of feedback and stuff? Or
They're regular dudes. Normally
Okay.
they pull them from battalions at Singo, or I think they pulled some from 1 and 3 last year, as well as from Tully. So they're just regular dudes. They're just sergeants normally, or a couple of woes. So they're not like being super, super cold, but they've obviously just got their run-on sheet. They're either ticking or not ticking the box. And but then they're not telling you how you've done on any stand.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some might be like, good, and that's about as much feedback as you'll get.
Yeah.
So that full set of ambush orders was obviously time constraining. That's probably where you feel the most stress as a secco is am I going to get this done in time? And I'm pretty sure we were ambush set about 5 minutes before the no later than timing we got in the Frago. So it was like, it was cutting it real close.
Yeah.
But got it done, and I think did pretty well in that stand in the end. And then as a section whole is probably just the stuff they add on that you're not used to, like the medical stands. You're doing some sort of section attack, whatever, or you're going into a building, and there's just a lot of moving parts with like the section command side, as well as the medical side, coordinating things, then moving to an LZ, stuff like that. Or for the live fire section attack, we had buckets attached. And so then you're in command of those, and that's definitely a friction point of if you never really do that as a secco. You're just in charge of a section, or even if you're in a section, you're with a platoon, the platoon commander's doing that cohort of assets. But you never really get that as a section commander to have actually attached assets to you to command.
In that, so it's unfamiliar for that stand, for example, but all of the stands basically. Do you know roughly how you're going, or are you genuinely like you could stuff the first stand and then just for the rest of the time just be like, you could hold on to that. Do you know what I mean? But what's the general gist going through the competition?
You really only know if you've done it before. So that was definitely a good thing for me is I'd done it before. So I knew from previous years like what stands we'd messed up. So I could sort of gauge it off that to be like last year I was like, we haven't done anything that badly yet. I reckon we're positioned pretty well. And like I said, it wasn't until that recon stand where we got compromised, I'd known we'd done something wrong. So you can sort of gauge it off how you think you've done. You don't know what the scoring criteria is going to be, so it's hard to perfectly gauge it. There's definitely stands I thought we did better than, and then seeing the results, a couple of months after the competition, they send out the AAR, and you were like, oh, I thought we did well on that, and we didn't. And likewise, I thought we'd done the counter ambush patrol stand like well, but not amazing. And then I think we did pretty well on that.
Oh, sweet.
So there was ones that I thought we'd done worse than we did. I thought we'd done probably average, and we'd done well in.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. So I suppose that's the Dog Cup in its entirety. Very brief, but in its entirety, an amazing competition. Getting tying for first would have been electric, and then subsequently coming back to second is still an amazing achievement. But I imagine the atmosphere was awesome at the end, sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely high because I've been on the teams that have done not so well, like coming fifth, and sixth, and it's definitely a different atmosphere to being right up there competing for that first spot. But yeah, definitely still hung over the head of thinking the next few days of what could I have done differently?
Yeah.
Like any little, and as I said before, that's the whole thing. It's mostly on the secco, but any single act by any member of the section could have pushed us over the edge. And I think of
huge pressure.
I think of all the things I could have done differently that might have pushed us over the edge, as I'm sure the other boys did as well.
Are you going to do it again?
I can't do it again as a section commander. So unless I get demoted and go back to being a digger, that's it for me. Which, again, hung over the head of that was my last crack and just short.
Yeah. No, it still would have been amazing to get second and have the battalion there to be like loving it. So I suppose if we push past the Dog Cup stuff and into Recon and your trade specifically, you talked about having done Recon for 4 years now. In the CH4 or Chinook episode, there was talking about ground Recon confirming like a cherry and ice criteria for landing zones, and that being set by the aviation assets, but then confirmed by ground Recon. I suppose the intent of this episode is to talk about that ground Recon and what you do and don't do on the ground to enable commanders, but more so the entire battalion. I think I toyed with two options here, asking you questions like what is Recon and stuff. I think that's more descriptive and less analysis. But I think we go through sort of a scenario where Battle Group Coral, being one RAR, is conducting a tactical task, and then we can talk about each of the combat teams and what your job is dependent on task and what you can sort of the value you can add and how difficult some things are. We'll definitely draw out that distinction between doing training in like large scale training areas with big standoff, good observations and fields of fire and stuff versus jungle. We'll talk about that today. But I think the scenario I've posed is, and this is my arbitrary analysis. We've just lodged into the south of an island to our north, and there's an enemy CDAT minus or company detachment established in a town 100 kilometres to our north on the island. We're calling that Objective Emu. Combat Team Alpha, so one of your companies, is approaching the objective from the southeast and will isolate Objective Emu using a cordon, giving Combat Team Bravo, who's approaching from the southwest, the ability to conduct ISR, but then their task is to clear Objective Emu from west to east. Simultaneously, Combat Team Charlie will conduct a Combat Team Immobile insertion with Chinooks north of Objective Emu to block the MSR north and south to stop reinforcements from the BDET to the north coming down to reinforce that CDET minus. Your call sign, we'll talk about where you're going to go, but can you just talk about what assets you have as a stand state in Recon in the platoon first, and then subsequently we'll talk about each of the combat teams and where you would add value.
Yep. So for that task, like that's battle group task, on the manning, Recon should have 5 patrols. Never sort of have that solution. Normally have about 4. And then it's up to the CO how he wants to use that. He will also have sniper pairs, quads as well attached to that. But in terms of the Recon aspect, whether he wants overall command to answer battle group CCIRs, and he'll task the Recon patrols accordingly. Otherwise, normally 6-3 Alpha would attach to Combat Team Alpha, 6-3 Bravo to Bravo, and Charlie to Charlie. Yeah. And then he'll have that Delta and Echo as either a reserve or his dedicated Recon element. And then it would be up to the company commander to task that Recon call sign. That's where PC comes in pretty heavily, because some company commanders probably, like if they're a first year major, won't have worked with Recon before, or won't have that, if they're not Recon qualified, won't have had direct command of them before. So advising them on how best to be used.
And that's, I suppose, the intent of this episode is that you get to front load like sort of OCs or combat team commanders on like how to use Recon, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So how big are your patrols? How large is?
So 6 man, 5 to 6 man. Gold standard is six personnel.
And is that 6 like for like, or is there something that distinguishes each of the members, or is it a Seco, 2 IC, and then 4 soldiers that are like trained?
So they've all the same training. They've all done the basic reconnaissance course. Within the patrol, you have the patrol commander, 2 IC, the scout, the medic/gunner, your patrol SIG, and normally your 6 will be like a spare rifle or UAS operator if you've got UAS capabilities.
Yeah, awesome. We'll definitely talk about UAS and the difference between persistent like ground recon versus UAS, and I assume you use both, so we'll get into that. But so if we go to the scenario that I just posed with that enemy CDAT minus on Objective Emu, so that call sign Combat Team Alpha coming from the southeast and being tasked with a cordon or achieving a cordon, what sort of, with that 6-3 asset that's attached to them, what are they likely to, what would you tell that combat team commander that you should be used for?
For 6-3 Alpha, attaching to the cordon, you'd want to probably go in early, generally 3 to 4 days earlier than when the combat team's getting there, because that sets pattern of life. Normally we go off 72 hours for pattern of life for defensive positions, where they're going, how their movements are going, when their pickets are changing, stuff like that. So it's specifically for that combat team, if they're setting the cordon and they want us to do a screen, it would be going in early, identifying maybe likely ambush locations, defensive positions if they've got standing patrol, stuff like that out, things that Combat Team Alpha need to clear before that cordon's set, or if we're doing a route recce, we need to take engineers with us if there's minefields, stuff like that. In terms of once the cordon's set, we'd probably then push forward again to basically be early warning for that.
So would you be short of the objective, for example, in the first element and then subsequently step up on a decision point, I suppose?
Yeah, you'd run that on the ground of where you think is suitable for all the taskings you've gotten, to whether if you don't need to directly PTR or OP that township, then you can probably have more standoff because you're just doing the area around it, depending on where you think the enemy picture is as well. With that, you'd PTR there, and then what's
PTR?
Point target reconnaissance.
Yep. And what's the aim of point target reconnaissance?
Basically to gather information.
Yeah.
The general role of recon, but where you can't set up an OP, you can't use UAS, you can't use those other things to answer questions. You're doing direct, like close reconnaissance. They've gone away from close reconnaissance because it implies you've got to get as close as possible. But point target reconnaissance is you are going to PTR a particular spot or township, going in, getting observation onto it because you can't from an OP, getting that information, pulling back, maybe going to a new spot, getting that information again from a different angle.
Yeah, awesome. So that's, I suppose, that cordon task, setting the preconditions for the cordon. With the task, you just talked about a number of different tasks that you get. Is it a lot of implied tasks, noting that the combat team commanders might not know exactly how to use you? Are you drawing out a lot of implied tasking being in your ConOps, being like, this is what we can achieve for you type thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So you'll normally get a long list of directed tasks as well, specified tasks, whether that's answering certain PIRs, where certain disposition of enemy are. But a lot of the implied tasks will be on infill, exfil of sighting FUPs, sighting ambush locations, doing a route recce of where they can go in, and then subsequent, like what follow-on forces can use the route, your patrol route as well, and movement speed of troops going through that area.
And I suppose that's that. So you're in the screen for that cordon for the combat team alpha in the east, coming from the southeast. What's the main effort of what is your main effort for that task?
So it's a pretty wide area you've got to service, but the main one would be just once that cordon is set, is denying enemy ISR elements, so enemy recon patrols, from conducting ISR into weak points of that cordon. Because if they are attempting to counterattack, they basically need to know that. So you'll be doing counter ISR, whether from an OP, you can do counter ISR patrols, or you can then task or recommend to that company commander to send out counter ISR patrols, noting if they're trying to find weak points to try and break out of that cordon.
No, that's awesome. So that combat team alpha is coming from the southeast, and we've successfully conducted the screen and fought the counter ISR battle, and then now the combat team alpha is set on objective EMU. If we shift tack to 6-3 Bravo, who's attached to combat team Bravo, with the clearance task, so they're coming in as a subsequent move, shift focus to that patrol, what are they likely to do, and where can they add value to that company commander as you push through preparing for the clearance?
So they're probably in there just as early as 6-3 Alpha, and their directed tasks would be directly onto that township. They're the combat team that's going to go and do that clearance, so they're the ones that need all that information on the township. So they'd be doing, again, PTRs, OPs, using UIS to identify, strong points, weak points, if they've set up wiring around buildings, if they've set up booby traps, where their defensive posture is orientated, where C2 nodes are, anything that you'd want as a company commander or as a rifle platoon company to then conduct your clearance or then shape your plan of how you're going to clear that township.
Yeah, so same. If they've got tanks in reserve, for example, in this township, but they're trying to hide it or something, or they have log nodes in there, softer targets, it's fuel bladders that are in certain buildings, and they're running sort of fuel across an area. That's you're trying to look for high value targets, and then also identify reserve, different disposition, and sort of makeup of the enemy force. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. That the overarching one will be confirm enemy disposition or identify this, that, and the other. And then, the specific tasks will come out through a HVT matrix of what you're looking for, whether that's fuel tankers, the battle group reserve, which, again, could be tanks, or that C2 element for follow-on forces, or even beforehand, if you can target that through IDF, through 6.5 prosecution of HVTs, then you're trying to get that done.
So you've just given me another excellent segue with fires. So are you so that being obviously organic mortars, but also like OS, like artillery? Are you also regularly practicing all arms call for fire, or are you enacting fire missions onto targets if we start to do preparatory fires or something for the assault?
Not for preparatory. That would then go to the company commander. An implied task for Combat Team Bravo as well would be to cite them an FUP for a combat team to then do their clearance. And then pre-H fires will happen from that company commander from there. But before they're even probably inserted, if we can direct fires, we'll call fire missions through mortars and regularly practice all arms or set DFs during our planning before we've even stepped of likely positions. And then adjust those.
So if we talk about now sending fire missions back to the company combat team headquarters, and you're also trying to answer the questions that you both will get explicitly from the combat team commander, but also some of the implied stuff, like you're getting alternate LZs for certain things, different dispositions and stuff. How important is comms to get back? I think this is an important time to talk about. It's like you need to get back to the combat team commander, and like I said, it could be 100 kilometres away as they step up through this island to the north. How much emphasis is there on your SIG, but also everyone with comms?
Yeah, it's pretty huge, especially within a recon patrol. Normally we carry a large amount of radios and ancillaries to get those comms back, because that's always the biggest friction point is, can we send data back? Can we send voice back? How far can it get? And that's a massive thing, because if we're getting the information but not reporting it, then there's no point us getting the information. If they haven't received that, then it's not enabling anyone, whether that be combat team or battle group, to do any sort of planning or position accordingly. So the main things we go off is beyond line of sight comms, which is like HF that we can punch out. Previously, we've done it from like the shore to ships if we're working with the Navy, or from other patrol to patrol, whether that's 20, 40 kilometres. And then, as you said, if it's a ship offshore, then it can be up to 100 kilometres. So we're going off beyond line of sight, which can be very finicky and difficult to get those comms effectively.
Is there any wizards in your patrol that are just like all over the HF? Because it's a dark art, right? It's completely different to line of sight communications, where it's almost point and shoot, basic encryption considerations and stuff. But like, is there anyone that's an absolute wizard with HF?
We always try and put dudes on SIG courses, the patrol SIG. I was patrol SIG when I was a digger and got put on SWC, and it definitely helped. I found that probably guys in Recon were at the time probably the best at doing those directional and beyond line of sight comms, just because it wasn't done much throughout the rest of the battalion or wider. It was a very niche thing that we had to do for our job, whereas they had a solution of they could just use line of sight comms, or they were on a PMV, whatever other vehicle, that they could just pump 50, 100 watts out, and whatever comms they've got is going to reach, just because you're pumping out that much wattage. Whereas we've only got what we can carry in our pack. We need to be all over our stuff. So I found, in terms of troubleshooting and the practical side of HF communication, the Recon guys were very, very good at it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so you talked about not being, in your Dog Cup example, you talked about trying to maintain a low signature and not be found, right? I imagine that's the same with comms. How do you go about keeping a low signature, noting that you talked about how early you would want to be in to start, point target reconnaissance and like establishing OPs and like answering those information requirements. How do you go about sort of also keeping a low signature with comms?
Again, massive issue, especially like as we progress, because there's always an EW threat now. There's always someone going to be targeting, especially that spectrum of comms. HF isn't used that often, so it's going to be pretty easy to find or target. So we always use directional antennas if we can, just that it's going to emit one way, the way we want. It's going to emit 360, but apart from the 90 degrees we're directing it, it's not going to emit that far. So it's going the direction we want it. So unless they're between us and where we're trying to shoot, they're not really going to pick up on it. As well as we use sked windows. So you're working in that OP/PTR routine to work in with when you're sending comms, and then you're not just constantly transmitting, because it's definitely a concern when you're the only element out there before everyone else is rocked up, that you're the only ones potentially transmitting, and they're going to be honing in on you. Once everyone's rocked up, it's pretty easy, because
that's busy,
Yeah,
right? They'll pick up everything basically, yeah.
And then, other call signs, Cav, mounted, just love pumping out comms and just
Hundreds
putting
of
everything
watts,
on, hundreds of watts. And they're not picking up your signature at that point. They just see this massive spike of the tanks, and I don't think the tanks care because they're tanks.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, okay, let's go back to the clearance task. So, Combat Team Bravo with 6-3 Bravo attached is moving forward, and you've sorted an excellent FUP. So they're in the FUP, and they're about to start their deliberate clearance. What are you doing? Are you still conducting recon as the clearance task unfolds, or is it less so? Are you handing over now to the main force?
Yeah, that handover point's pretty much at the FUP.
Yeah.
So we'll send that back in a window, a sked window as well, of where we want to marry up. We'll marry up at an assembly area, lead them into the FUP, but pretty much from that assembly area, they are the fighting element on the ground. If anything happens, it's pretty much like we're bugging out and they're fighting the fight. And that's why we need to be good at our job as well, because if they are getting hit from that assembly area to the FUP, they're very vulnerable, which we haven't done our job properly if we're not keeping them undetected as well. Yep. And then once they're in the FUP, there's not much we can provide in terms of a fighting aspect. We're less than a section. Normally we'll send a pair off to provide battlefield commentary, or we can do that in line with them doing their clearance battlefield commentary, but we're not in the fight with them.
Yeah, okay, yeah, cool. So that combat team conducts the deliberate clearance, but before that, as you're protecting the flanks from the assembly area up to the FUP, over your left shoulder, you obviously hear the Chinooks coming in, and you would know that you've sat in the orders and you would know what's going on in terms of order of battle. With the Chinooks, obviously the Chinook pilot we had on talked about like confirming landing zones before you land and all that sort of stuff. If we talk about... So let's do two different scenarios. One, there is no air defence threat, and that first Chinook can come in and sort of put recon in early. What would they do for the AMO task up to the north on that block?
Yep. So for that scenario, if there's no air defence threat, through planning, we'd probably also be talking to the Chinook pilots to where they think they can sight LZs. The biggest thing for us is we're supposed to be under the detection threshold the entire time. If we just land a couple of Ks away, they're going to know we're there. They're going to put two and two together if it's a decent enemy commander and say, hey, it's probably a recon element, which we become pretty ineffective because then they're going to start doing what we talked about before of counter ISR patrolling and looking for us. So the biggest thing for us would be inserting beyond audible range of the Chinook, which I think is 5 kilometres by day and you double it by night. So talking to the Chinook pilots, say, hey, we can't land closer than 5 kilometres or 10 kilometres by night, drawing that circle and saying, where can you land outside this? And then from that, landing outside, and then it's just a longer infill.
It's like a stomp.
Yeah, just a massive
And you've got
stomping.
all your comms gear, everything set up. Yeah, and you're trying to, I suppose, because you're moving away from... that's an interesting point. So just before we get into you reconning landing zones for the subsequent AMO, if we come back a bit, how do you sustain yourself out for long periods of time? Obviously, difference between mounted and dismounted, but like how do you go about sustaining yourself?
So if we were AMO, so we're just completely dismounted, we're just getting Chinooked in, normally we'd run off 3 to 5 days. If we need more, we'd be trying to get caches dropped by someone, whether that's another call sign in a Chinook, or we're taking additional Jerry's rations and we're having to stomp in with those as well and dropping them, halfway along our infill route to then if we're there for 4 days, we're sending dudes back to go pick up those stores and bring them forward. So we've got another, 2-3 days resupply to push us out to maybe 7.
Yeah.
But that's definitely a thing you got to look at as well during your early planning stages of that timeline of when you're expecting the combat team there to do the clearance and when you're inserting or when you can insert to get the most amount of time for eyes on, as well as being sustainable during that entire time.
Yeah, so like a balancing act between the two.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it makes you, I imagine if you've got a heap of Jerry's and like significant amount of stores, it takes you a lot longer to get that 5 kilometres into where you need to be.
So absolutely.
Yeah. So what about mounted? So ignore the AMO for 1 minute and come back to the mounted stuff. Significantly more sustainable?
Yeah, so mounted, depending on the vehicles, one of ours got SRVs this year, but 3 have previously operated in buckets. It's generally around that 14 days regardless of what you've got, unless you're working on UTVs or small, quad bikes. But any SRV larger vehicle, we generally run off, you're going to have within your pack and then the car itself about 14 days worth of supply. So it can pretty much last a pretty significant amount of time to where you're going to be sustainable.
Yeah, okay. So, no air defence threat or little air defence threat or can be sort of negated, and you come in, drop 5 kilometres short of where you actually need to be on an LZ, and then you stomp in. What are you sort of looking for for that AMO element before they infill?
So for that Chinook, once we've landed at our LZ, there's going to be a follow-on force in 3 days. So if we can answer stuff, again, implied tasks on our infill route, we'll answer those of whether there's alternate LZs, because they can probably land a bit closer. They're not worried about audible range as much or remaining undetected. And if they are, we're pushing out to find alternate LZs for them, because we don't want everyone landing at the same LZ we've landed at. Because for whatever reason, if someone has identified that we've landed there, they're probably going to want to check it out or put someone there.
Yeah.
And then so we're sighting alternate LZs for those choppers on our infill route, as well as doing a route reconnaissance along our infill route to let that company commander, battle group commander know how long it's going to take them, or how long it's expected to take them to then patrol that same distance. Because what we patrol as 6 man is probably going to blow out if you're patrolling with 100-person or plus combat team.
Yeah. So that's, I suppose, you're looking at LZs, trying to sight alternate LZs. Have you already established comms with the chopper beforehand so that when the main force comes in, you've got comms?
Yeah. So we'll have their nets and we'll comms check with them when we step. So we've 100% got it on insert infill, and then should be running the same nets when they insert the combat team. So should have comms with them. Yeah,
perfect. So now let's pose a more difficult sort of scenario where there is an air defence threat, and you can't get 5 kilometres from the landing zone. What sort of, would it be safe to say that 6-3 Bravo could be re-rolled as an implied task up to site LZs, or how do you make it work when you can't land early using helicopters?
So you probably a patrol will get a specified task then to site LZs outside that range. You might even get a task to identify where those air defences are to try and take out with direct fires or indirect fires. And if not, then it becomes that planning thing of not too much of a difference, but you're looking at the planning range of whatever air defence they've got, probably pushing it out a couple of Ks as well. And then that's your planning range of how far you've got to insert. So if you've got an air defence that goes out to 16K, then it push it out to 17, 18 of where you've got to insert, and it becomes a very, very long stomp in.
Yeah. Just longer and longer walks, isn't it? Yeah. If to enable your, like, the task that you get, and you talked about carrying all this stuff to the OP or wherever you're going to set up, what sort of, we talked about comms before and having a significant amount of comms, including beyond line of sight. What other stuff have you got, like sights, laser designators? What other stuff do you carry, and what have you experimented on, like to enable your job in OPs or doing point target reconnaissance?
So we'll carry a whole suite of sights and cameras, everything like that, and we've got a massive, like, we take a patrol trunk out with us, and that normally stays at, on the ship, FOB, in the rear esh, wherever we are, and then we just take out our mission essential equipment, basically. So depending on what task it is, we've got cameras that are more directed for an OP. They've got 100 times zoom, or cameras that, it's basically just an iPhone, not an iPhone, but it's just a Coolpix camera that you can take. It's better for a PTR. Because if you take a 100 times zoom camera on a PTR, then it's going to be pretty shaky. You're not going to get very clear images from a couple hundred metres away, as opposed to in an OP 2Ks away.
Yeah.
We'll take thermal, UAS. That'll just be task dependent on what we're expecting to do, what's likely, weather dependent as well. If there's heavy fog, heavy rain, that'll change our task. If we can't do an OP, if there's going to be heavy rain, heavy fog in the morning, to where, why would you conduct an OP when you know you're going to get up there and you're not going to be able to see anything for 2 hours in the morning, and if it rains at all?
I think, and commanders will often, you talked about UAS, commanders will often use UAS because it seems a bit easy. You just throw it up in the air and then you can sort of, ID a route in front of you, or, confirm certain things. What's the difference between a UAS and, they're going to be everywhere and, it's going to be messy, like you talked about before, sensors picking up every single thing. Yeah. What's the difference between UAS, and I imagine you use them as well, you talked about it before, and then persistent, like ground recon, like what you do for a job?
So we'll have our internal UAS, which is generally a lot smaller. Again, we've got to carry it with us if we're taking it, so it's got to fit in a pack, and we'll use that just to pretty much prove our route or prove holes in where we've identified that we can't get information from. So it'll just supplement what we're doing on the ground to answer everything that needs to be answered. That's internal of the Recon patrol, and then obviously the higher and higher you get in command, you're going to have access to more or a higher level of UAS that can give you more fidelity of answering information. In terms of what we can provide that they can't is obviously those things of they're a finite resource. So is Recon on the ground, but you're not always going to have access to it. Say it's held at brigade or higher. If you're requesting that as a company battle group commander, it may just get turned off because you don't have access to that asset at the time because it's already on a flyover or it's back on station recharging, whatever it is. So I think that's the biggest difference is we've got that persistence that one of our principles is make and maintain contact of you're getting eyes on the enemy and then you are persistently having eyes on the enemy, whether that's through OP or PTRing, having persistent eyes on to where you're getting the whole information or you're having the whole time to get that information and relay that back. Whereas UAS can provide great fidelity for a period and 100% can provide stuff we can't, but it's only going to be for that short window of certain things you need answered. Yeah. Whereas you're getting a whole picture and you're getting a pattern of life with ground recon, as well as we are never going to be combat ineffective due to any atmospherics, whether that be weather.
It might suck, but you're not combat ineffective.
Target. Yeah. We can work in the rain, we can work in the mud, we can work in the jungle, whereas in the jungle, US isn't going to work. There's too much canopy.
Yep.
Stuff like that.
And so that's the endurance stuff. Also, I imagine that when you send sit reps back or when you send all your data on SCADs from point target reconnaissance or sitting in an OP or something, you're adding some analysis to that as well. There's a human being at the other end, being the patrol commander, like adding a bit more of an assessment. This is what I assess to be the case. Is that fair to say that you're adding a little bit more detail than would be the case with just a sensor flying over sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like in our performance.
That's where you earn your money, right?
Yeah, pretty much all our performers that we send back, the last piece of info will be a commander's assessment, which is like, as the PC, my assessment on the ground, which 100% comes with experience because my first X as a PC, maybe I didn't have that experience to know exactly what I'm looking at, and you just gain that over time to where you can send that to a company battle group commander. They know I've done this a fair bit, and then they're trusting my assessment as well, whereas they might get something different, a different piece of information from a UAS, say, which has happened before on X to me. A few years ago, we were attached to a cavalry call sign who had some pretty good UAS that they'd been using the whole exercise for great reporting. Like it was seeing everything and identifying enemy everywhere, and it was just enabling so much action from infantry and cavalry call signs to go and clear those enemy positions. And we got to the last sort of main defensive position, which had a bit of a like miniature trench system, which they'd sent the drone over, and the drone sort of reported it was two separate V-shaped like little trench lines shaped out, or two pits. And then when we as a recon patrol went forward and identified it, like we were seeing the same thing, but then we were also seeing like guys going in one end, coming out the other. So we were sort of thinking it wasn't V-shaped, it was more like in a W shape, and it must have been connected somewhere in the middle. And they sent the drone over again. It wasn't seeing the same thing, so they sort of went off what the drone had seen as that was their asset. They were reporting it rather than what we would seen on the ground, which was guys going in one end, coming out the other, and not being able to see what's exactly going on in the middle, but having that commander's assessment that it's probably connected somewhere. And then so they report that back, go through, and then they do a combat team clearance to that position, and they did a subsequent clearance of those two assessed trench lines, and the call signs pretty much came together and nearly converged in the middle to where they needed a pretty major deconfliction, because it was the fact that trench line was connected, and they'd put up hoochies and cam those hoochies up just for what ended up being shade. It wasn't even OHP. They just put those hoochies up for shade, and it wasn't identified. They had something from UAS and something that the Recon Patrol was reporting differently, and it was trusting that Recon PC's decision because he's got eyes on the ground and he's making that assessment himself. Whereas the UAS, you're just getting the imagery. You've got to make that assessment yourself. Yeah.
I think to wrap it up, I suppose, with the integration stuff. So you talked before about cavalry armoured assets making a hell of heaps of noise. You talked about having engineers to prove a route and assess obstacles and stuff. How do you work with engineers and cavalry and ARTI as well?
So we'll normally have guys on our basic course, like basic recon. We'll normally try and get a few arty guys, a few engineers. Cav they used to do, but they've sort of transitioned out because they do a lot of mountain reconnaissance and they're good at it, and they have a lot more access to UAS stuff, and they can provide like that screen task would definitely be provided to cavalry that they can perform really well because they can service a larger area due to their mobility on the ground.
Yeah.
In terms of arty and engineers, they're great to have on recon. Like arty guys, still the most effective guy I've ever seen on the battlefield was a recon called JTAC, who was just pretty much killed a battle group by himself sitting on a hill because he knew exactly how to perform recon tasks, and you had the confidence to send him up by himself, and he knew what he was doing in an OP, and he can call in fires a lot quicker than us calling in an all arms and taking 5 minutes to adjust fire. He's just got DF sighted everywhere, and he sees something move and he's just dropping bombs on it a minute later.
Yeah, and air assets and stuff as well. He's got close air support and all that sort of stuff.
Absolutely. So those guys having that recon qualification is a huge asset to probably them and us as well.
Yeah.
And in terms of engineers, again, it's just what they can provide that we can't. In terms of like a route recce, been tasked before with like bridge classification, stuff like that.
Yeah.
I can look at a bridge. I can tell you what I'm looking at.
Give a rough guide, rough guide.
Yeah, it's a bridge. Looks like you could drive across it.
Yeah.
Whereas engineers are going to know, what sort of vehicles can cross it, what DEMs they're going to need to make that bridge ineffective or blow it up, as well as route recce. They know where they've got to look to mark minefields, to site minefields. Whereas we're just saying, there's a road, you can put mines along it.
Yeah.
So they can just provide something that we can't, and them having that recon qual provides a massive asset to both their regiment as well as if they're attached to an infantry battalion.
Yeah, that's excellent. I suppose just to wrap up the episode, like I want to talk about from a combat team commander's perspective, but then also from a soldier and an infantry battalion's perspective. We'll start with the combat team commander first. So a combat team commander's been given a task and they've got a 6-3 asset allocated to them. What should they do in planning? In the early stages of planning, they drop a warning order with likely tasks and stuff. What should they do to enable you to have the best effect out days beforehand?
Probably just try and draw that information from the PC or have that trust in the PC. And the same for any support element really is there probably an SME in their subject of if a company commander hasn't worked with that asset before is draw that info from them. They're going to get their set list of what they want answered, probably go to the PC, and the PC should also be going to them and saying, hey, this is what I can provide you, but find that information, find that happy medium of where this is what we can provide you, this is what you want answered, this is what we can achieve and how we can achieve it best, rather than just not having that talk to be like, this is what we want answered, and then you as a PC just getting a bunch of directed tasks.
Yeah.
And because I've had that before where I've just got a bunch of directed tasks and I'm thinking,
I could do this so much better.
How am I supposed to achieve this? Or it doesn't really make any sense.
Yeah.
To where like if you go to them beforehand, work out those friction points to say, I can achieve this, this and this during whatever phases and be part of that planning process.
Yeah. And I think like noting the last 50 minutes, like you're passionate about this stuff. So this would be the best part where you get to tell combat team commanders what you can achieve and how to massage it and go about it in the best way. That'd be the best part of your job as a PC.
That's definitely one of the best parts of the job is it's the most command you have and the most influence you have on a large scale plan of you're directly influencing a whole combat team or battle group planning with what decisions you're making on the ground. And that even goes for diggers as well. The information you're getting on the ground is directly influencing like big moving parts in terms of a combat team and battle group.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so let's switch tack from combat team commander to a soldier in the infantry battalion looking for their next, and you talked about engineers going on at JFTs as well and JTACs and those sorts of call signs coming on basic recon. If you're looking for the next challenge in an infantry battalion and you're like, what should I go to in support company? Why choose recon, I suppose?
For me, it was always like I joined infantry and people always say like recon's just advanced infantry, which they say it as like a piss take, but it's true. We don't learn any new skills. We're just doing infantry stuff just at a higher level of discipline really. So that was my thing was I joined infantry to be infantry and then recon was the highest level I could do that as well as I mentioned, like when I did it, having a bigger impact in what I'm doing. I'm directly making decisions as a digger. It's not so much a drill as it would be in a section attack. Section attack's just a drill. every decision on the ground I'm making as a digger in an OP, a PDR, or as a PC with the patrol is my decision. It's not a drill. I'm making every conscious decision to do what I do, and that's information loops feeding back to the battalion and influencing planning.
And is it the same? Like, so because you're working in isolation as small teams, like there is a lot expected of you as well. So is that, I suppose, stressful at times, but also excellent? You know, when you establish that HF shot back to, hundreds of kilometres back to a ship or something, you're like, we've nailed this. Do you know what I mean? And when you start answering information requirements and the Combat Team Bravo perspective, they're formed up in this perfect FUP that you've pre-sighted, and they don't get attacked from the assembly forward to the FUP. Is that really rewarding? That must be awesome.
Yeah, it's super rewarding having that feedback and being able to see your decisions on the ground influence things rather than just being a part of a big cog. You're directly making your own decisions and you've got to be like thinking every moment of what you're doing and doing it the correct way. And it's not just what you're doing as a digger is affecting the patrol, affecting the combat team and the battle group. So you've got to be conscious of that and perform to a high standard.
Yeah, the pressure's immense. I think that's Recon, I suppose. That sums up dismounted and mounted infantry recon. We went through a number of different tactical tasks with Combat Team Alpha doing a cordon, Combat Team Bravo clearance, and each of the patrols allocated to them, and then the AMO to establish the block to the north. Corporal Andrew Noseda, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Awesome.
Thanks for listening to the Cove Podcast. Explore our channel for more great audio PME content. Also, visit us at cove.army.gov.au for hundreds of additional resources. The Cove, the learning home of the Australian profession of arms.